So, we were talking about Beast Wars as a podcast about two comedians rewatching the 1990s TV series Beast Wars Transformers. Although we are discussing a children's television show, the podcast itself is not intended for children.
Hey, Phil, I got some exciting news.
Oh, what's that, Andy?
We've gotten some of our first listener mail.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, so listeners, as a reminder, you can always reach out to us at beastwarstalk@gmail.com. And we've actually got some email here from Daniel. It's a hi, Oh, it's actually not for you or me, it's for Apetimus. Well, so everybody, yeah,
Somebody talking about Apetimus?
Yeah, hey, Apetimus. This is actually pretty exciting. I've got a listener question for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is not a surprise for Apetimus at all. For all of my adoring fan, why don't you read the letter?
Sure thing. It says, Hi, Apetimus. My name is Daniel, and my question for you is if you were to fight one on one with Big Convoy, do you think you could win the fight?
Who the fuck is Big Convoy?
Oh, yeah, so Big Convoy is a character from the Japanese animated series Beast Wars Neo. He's kind of, in the Optimus style mold of being a big leader guy. He's kind of a loner, but I think still a good leader. I think he transforms into a mammoth.
Are you saying I will fight a mammoth? You think Apetimus won't fight a mammoth? Let me tell you something. I'll fight a motherfucking mammoth. You think I'm not tough enough for the Ice Age? Shit, I ended the Ice Age.
Whoa. Some new Aptimus lore, everybody. That's cool. I don't think anybody's challenging your toughness, but like his name implies, Big Convoy is pretty big.
Oh, he's big convoy? Well, we got a great big convoy too of whoop ass. Wait till he sees these big guns.
Oh, listeners, I wish you could see. I just got a full, beautiful Aptimus flex. Yeah, I see your big guns, Aptimus. Big Convoy has a big gun too, but it is actually more of a gun, or it's actually called Big Cannon. And hold on, I've got some notes here. Looks like he once blew up a planet with it.
Oh, well, oh, look at the time. Well, brother, I best be off now. I've got to go file my taxes.
Oh, I thought you took care of that.
No, I have to file quarterly now because Apetimus is now an independent contractor. And with that, Apetimus out.
All right. Well, it makes sense that he's on top of things because, as we previously discussed, he is a CPA, a certified public ape. So, thank you, Daniel, for writing in that question. As usual, I'm sure Aptimus clarified everything for you. And other listeners, if you have any questions for Aptimus, or even these other two chuckleheads on the podcast, feel free to write in beastwarstalk@gmail.com.
We would love to hear from you.
Yeah. But in the meantime, we were talking about Beast Wars.
We were talking about Beast Wars. I'm Phil Thomas.
I'm Andy Hunter. Thank you all for joining us. Today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 15, The Spark. It can be described in brief as another Race to the Stasis Pod episode, but I like how this one really plays out differently from Fallen Comrade, which was the one that introduced Tigatron. It's not in the frozen north, it's in a barren Energon Geyser wasteland. It focuses on different characters. And I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, when I was a teenager watching the show for the first time, this was one of my favorite episodes. So I was eager to see if it lived up to my memories.
You know, that's interesting. I'm not sure if it stood out to me when I watched it as a kid. Maybe I didn't appreciate it. But upon rewatch, this is a fantastic episode.
Hell yeah. Let me jump to the end. This is still one of my favorite episodes. And I think it is my favorite episode that we've seen so far in this rewatch. Before I rewatched it, I did write down my recollections of it. I liked the world building, explaining what a spark is. As someone who vaguely liked G1 Transformers but did not have strong memories of it, I don't know if a spark was really explained all that well back then, but when I was seeing Beast Wars as a teenager, I did not know what a spark was. So some of this was helpful for me. I really liked the focus on Rhinox. I feel like oddly, Rhinox kind of got a better highlight here than he did in Dark Designs, which you'd think would have been a more insight into Rhinox episode. I mean, he got some really great highlights here. Cheetor had some cool moments, and I think Airazor is super cool. Those were the things I remembered about the episode before I rewatched it. But now I have another 2 pages of notes having rewatched it.
Yeah, I had quite a few notes too, and I'll save my thoughts for the end of the episode because I needed to have my memory jogged a little bit in watching the episode. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah. So this episode was written by Larry DiTilio, one of the 2 head writers of the show. So I don't know if that feeds into some of the cool world building and just feeling like it's a step up from the other episodes or not. Not to cast any shade on any of the other writers we've had so far. We start with seeing a stasis pod orbiting the unnamed, mysterious 2-mooned planet upon which our action takes place. It is hit by space rocks and crashes down. Were there any recognizable Earth-like landmasses that you noticed, Phil?
Great question. I rewatched that scene 3 times so that I could determine whether or not there was some sort of Earth-like tell, and not really. There were some generic ocean landmass outlines, but there was nothing specifically depicting Earth that I could make out.
Okay. So yeah, no obvious landmarks like the entire coastline of Africa or the Great Wall of China or anything like that.
No, I was like, wow, that's clearly an outline of East Timor.
So the stasis pod begins crashing down. In the dark side, Tarantulas is tracking it, and then he is caught off guard by Megatron. So I think this is our first hint that Tarantulas is kind of doing his own stuff that he's keeping from Megatron. And specifically with stasis pods. And I believe throughout the rest of season 1, we will see Tarantulas trying to get his hands on a stasis pod for some reason.
Presumably because he wants yet another arachnid.
Well, we'll see. He is pretty eager to go to the stasis pod, and he says, "Oh, I'll help out getting it." And Megatron's like, "No, we need you here tracking that thing. Scorponok and Black Arachnid can take care of it." I did like how when Megatron leaves, they each mutter insults about each other. Tarantula says, tin tyrant. And Megatron mutters, treacherous arachnid. So Megatron is either outright aware or just knows Tarantulas well enough to always suspect him of being up to something. And I did like that insight.
Yeah, that was some good character building.
We already knew one rule of Megatron's for being a good tyrant is to always be able to escape from your own jail cells. Maybe another rule about being a good tyrant is to always know who the treacherous punks on your team are.
Yeah, it's okay for your folks to have those impulses. Just stay on top of them.
Yeah. We then cut over to Rhinox being in an area of energon geysers. The implication is that this is Predacon territory because he says, there's a lot of energon here, but it's not stable enough to use. No wonder the Predacons don't mine here. But in every other episode where they talk about, oh no, we're going to have to go into Predacon territory for this, they seem to make a deal about it as if, in general, they try not to go into Predacon territory. So it seemed weird to me that just like, oh, Rhinox is just basically having a stroll in Predacon territory, or I guess he's checking out like, oh, maybe we'll mine a little bit in Predacon territory.
You know, that's interesting you say that. I had an observation at the end of the episode. Based on how they're able to detect the Maximals in their territory, it seems like Predacons are able to detect other Predacons in their own territory better and where their positions are. Megatron knows exactly where Black Arachnia and Scorponok are. And it seems like they're better able to handle the raw energon surges than the Maximals. I was wondering why, and I was thinking maybe their technology is this why that's their area. They have their own sensors in the area. and they're adapted to being better able to handle what's going on in an area. So if you think they're going to have an advantage and that their sensors are there and they're going to get the drop on you before you would be able to fight back, I would consider that Predacon territory, and I would be loath to go in there.
Hmm. That's a really good thought, because in a previous episode we talked about what makes something maximal territory or Predacon territory. I think the only sensible explanation we came up with is that Cheetor and Tigatron are peeing to mark maximal territory, which I still like that idea, but I think the Maximals probably also supplement that with their own sensor arrays and stuff like that, which it would make sense that the Predacons are also doing, and they're marking their territory by extending their physical apparatus to a small extent around their territory.
Yeah, so we could probably maybe use that as a working assumption and see how that pans out in future episodes.
Yeah. Rhinox sees the stasis pod coming down. He tries to contact the Axelon to let them know, but there's too much interference. I had one note about this. He talks into his forearm, like that's where he's got a communicator. And I think we've seen Rat Trap or somebody do that in previous episodes too. And then later on in this episode, when Cheetor is in cheetah form, he taps his chest as if he's wearing a Starfleet communicator. And I think the reason the animators do this is because things like that make these characters more human. But to me, as an adult who overthinks this show, I'm like, if I'm a robot, why would I build my communications array in my arm? Why not build it into my head, which I already use for listening and talking? Because if I lose my head, I'm screwed anyway.
Well, this is because there are two different species of Cybertronians. There's the Starfleet Cybertronians and there's the Dick Tracy Cybertronians. Now,
All right,
the
that makes
Dick Tracy Cybertronians have their comm links in their wrists, whereas the Starfleet
Okay.
ones. Boop, doop, boop, doop.
Yeah, obviously these two tribes predate Maximals and Predacons. They even predate, I think, Autobots and Decepticons. It's kind of like, I think, northern hemisphere of Cybertron is the Dick Tracys, and southern hemisphere is maybe the Star Trekkies. Nice one, Phil.
Thank you.
But anyway, Rhinox can't reach the other Maximals, so he's on his own. He sets off after the pod. I noticed he's running there in robot mode. In the past, I feel like we've seen him seemingly make pretty decent time in Rhino form. So I never necessarily got the sense that his robot mode had a faster running speed, but maybe he has more endurance that way. Maybe he needed his robot eyes to track the pod more accurately. Either way, I know later on, it's basically a plot point that Rhinox is already at the limits of the energon his body can absorb. So I think there's probably that plot reason that they had him run there in robot form to explain why his body was already at its energon limit. But I just thought that was interesting because we've seen Rhinox running long distances in Rhino form and plowing through stuff.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I guess I assumed that his sprint speed was faster as a robot, and maybe that underscored how important it was for him to try to get to the pod as soon as possible. My other takeaway was it's just kind of rare to see Rhinox out on patrol. I assumed that patrolling was something that was reserved for the faster Maximals and Predacons, just so that if they saw something or they saw danger, they could basically outrun or outfly it back to the base.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although it has been a bit inconsistent. I do think you're right. We have seen Rhinox being the guy at the control panel in the Axelon often, saying, oh, hey, I'm detecting something. Let's call Cheetor or whoever is close. But who knows? If he specifically was there to check out Energon, I can buy the idea that he's their Energon mining expert. And if we can only afford to send one person out to an Energon place, it's Rhinox because he's the one who's going to be best in the position to tell, is this a place worth looking into more? Elsewhere, Cheetor also spots the pod. He contacts Tigatron and asks him to inform the base and then come back him up. I really liked that relay system, and it makes me wonder why, as far as we know so far, they haven't set up actual communications relay systems. But then I thought, oh, maybe that's what those devices Cheetor used prematurely and then blew up in equal measures were supposed to be. Maybe one of their functions, in addition to searching for Energon or whatever, would have been to act as a communications relay. And as we all know, once a machine is destroyed in Beast Wars, it can never be rebuilt.
And yet, Rhinox's wrist communicator is indestructible.
Yeah, well, it is funny to imagine them. They reach this planet. They're like, man, we're stuck here indefinitely. But you know what? We have a shoebox sized chunk of indestructible material. Let's have some ideas. What do we want to make out of this? I don't know. Oh, we could make maybe a shield that one of us wears. We can make a spear with a point that will never dull. Maybe a spear whose tip is one of those zappy things that will turn you into beast mode and knock you out. And then Rhinox is like, hear me out, guys. A scanning device that I wear on my rhino wrist, and I use, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 months. And everybody's like, all right, sold. Make it happen.
Rhinox, you usually have a bunch of stupid ideas, but for once, I'm 100% on board. And then they cut to the Predacon base. So, we're going to make some kind of indestructible, shocky thing that traps people in beast mode. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, yes, yes. Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, nobody thinks to use their indestructible stuff to build floors to protect them from the lava that their base is covered in.
Or a part that fixes the ship that gets them back to Cybertron.
Yeah, well, priorities. So anyway, Cheetor relays that information to Tigertron. It's Tigertron to relay that back to base and then come back him up. I like the big cat, little cat brotherly relationship between Tigertron and Cheetor. And in general, this first scene with Cheetor sets up for the rest of the episode. I think this is a really good Cheetor episode. We've talked in the past about Cheetor at his best is when he's got a big heart, when he believes in his teammates. Cheetor at his worst is when he's really headstrong, full of himself, not listening to anybody else. So I felt like this was still a very youthful and inexperienced, but somewhat more mature and chill Cheetor that I liked a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I've got some notes about that later on when Cheetor catches up with Rhinox. Although, one thing that is funny, Tigatron tells Cheetor to watch himself, and Cheetor says he always does. And I'm sure Cheetor thinks he's always watching himself, but history doesn't really bear that out, does it?
Yeah, not real. Well, I mean, but he does acquit himself a little bit better in this episode, but we'll get to those scenes in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. As Cheetor sets out, we see a falcon. As is often the case, they do a good job establishing a nearby animal.
Yeah, you couldn't see it, but off screen, that falcon was having a conversation with the gorilla next to it, and they were both having a conversation with a rhino on the ground. And it was all that falcon could do to tear itself away from that amazing conversation to go see what was up with the stasis pod.
Yeah, the gorilla was like, I'm almost done this book. You want to borrow it when I'm done? Falcon was like, all right, yeah, hang on to it for me. I got to go see what this cheetah is doing. We cut over to Scorponok and Black Arachnia, who are tracking the pod. They have a nice exchange about Megatron, because Black Arachnia is getting on Scorponok's case for being so loyal to Megatron. And I liked Scorponok's point of view in this episode here. It's a combination of actual respect for Megatron, as well as recognition of the dangers of opposing Megatron. And I'm choosing to interpret this that Scorponok actually also respects and approves of the idea of punishing disloyalty as part of his overall Predacon philosophy. That he's like, hey, I respect Megatron for being strong, for getting stuff done, and I also respect him for not taking any shit from his underlings.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because as a kid, I probably thought that Scorponok was lame for espousing that. But as an adult, those are probably some of the biggest factors in why any of us who work in corporate structures listen to our bosses. One, they probably know what they're doing. Two, you respect your boss for not taking shit from any of their subordinates. And three, if you oppose your boss, there are a lot of downsides to that. So, for all of us who are adults just working our 9 to 5s, let's all pull a Scorponok here and keep our heads down.
Yeah. I, in fact, go the extra mile, and about 1/5 of the time or so when I'm at work, I also talk like a caveman. Somebody's like, oh, Andy, I need you to get these reports done. And I'm like, yes, Andy, complete reports for boss. Andy, good at reports.
And then when they ask you for a status update, The missiles!
That should be my catchphrase now. I'll be the guy who always shouts, "The missiles."
Why is that guy always talking about missiles?
I don't know, but I like the cut of his jib.
Is that like an America's Second Amendment thing?
So we are back with Rhinox. He has reached the pod. We have a nice camera angle here. The camera tracks right behind Rhinox's feet as he enters the pod, which I thought was a nice way of building up suspense that we know we're near the pod, but we don't have a good view of what the situation is. So I looked into the director of this episode. It was directed by Colin Davies. His first episode that he directed for Beast Wars, he would go on to direct 4 others. He also directed 1 episode of another mainframe show, Shadow Raiders, but it seems like he's primarily a VFX guy. So I don't know if he maybe had been a mainframe animator at some point, and that's how he got into directing those. But so Rhinox has reached the pod. It is in rough shape. He starts having an energon surge, as we talked about earlier, and he is able to divert power from his weapons array to his energon field dampers. Which at first I was like, this felt like another Star Trek-y kind of thing, because often on Star Trek, the captain is always saying, divert power from weapons to the life support or to shields or whatever. And I was like, these are robots, not like a ship. And their weapons, it seems like, are a separate thing. That how can you divert power? But then I thought about it a bit more, tried to give the show some more credit. For those Transformers whose weapons are a separate part of their bodies, so not the ones basically with I-beams or shoulder cannons and that kind of stuff, the ones who take out a gun and shoot it, perhaps we can assume that while their weapons are stored within their bodies are like charging up that weapon, essentially. Thus, it can sometimes work the other way around. I've got this charged up weapon inside me. Why don't I direct the power the other way? And I'll start draining some power from that weapon to boost up another one of my systems or something. And then I went a step further and thought, maybe this explains why so often immediately after a battle, they all start having those energon shocks and need to transform into beast mode. And it's because during the battle, perhaps they were diverting energy from their energon dampers to their weapons.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually never really thought about where the energy comes from their weapons, but it does make sense they might be able to divert stuff like that. I wish we could do that as humans. Brain, transfer power from kidneys to penis. Acknowledged.
Well, I mean, in some ways, our bodies do that, which is why we get sleepy after a big meal. It's because our body is diverting more blood flow to our stomach to
We're
divert.
sleepy after other things.
Well, hey yo.
You still do the disclaimer before the beginning of each episode,
Oh yes.
right?
Somebody talking about Apetimus? I like to redirect all sorts of things from one part of my body to the other. Usually it's about banana consumption, and sometimes it's about banana rejection.
Yeah, well, no offense, Apetimus. Usually I love to talk bananas with you, but if we start talking about your banana hammock, I don't need any more details.
Yeah, no need to say more. That having been said, my excrement is very regular. I just wanted to put that out there as a plug for bananas. Apetimus out.
Well, I'm glad to know that. I care about Apetimus and his regularity. And listen, I don't need to know much about Apetimus's sex life, but I'm always happy to know about his toilet life.
Check out these 3 big guns.
Oh,
No.
Apetimus, come on. You didn't need to go that far.
So anyway, all that is to say, maybe that is me reading into the show too much. But as somebody who's always complaining about what are the rules in this show, is I like that even if most of that work was done in my head, it's still like backed up by something in the show and might go away towards explaining how some of the stuff works.
Yeah, it also underscores some of the Star Trek mechanics influences that we've seen in other episodes too.
Yeah. So Rhinox opens the pod and we see the protoform. This one looks different from the slapped together version we saw in Double Jeopardy, which was basically Black Arachne's head on a generic robot body. This one looks more like, I'm sure you had the same note, like the T-1000 liquid humanoid form, albeit with a hollow center for its spark.
That's interesting. I was more focused on the spark itself, and I feel like in this episode, the protoform looks a little more feminine for obvious reasons. And where the spark is placed, it looks like a uterus.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll have to go back and check. I feel like I recall it being a little more just kind of in the stomach area. But yeah, maybe it was more lower abdomen.
It may have been a complete coincidence, but that was just the first way I was struck by it.
Hmm. So the pod is too damaged to initiate the DNA scan, and the spark will die in 8 cycles.
No.
So Rhinox gets to work. We see him removing a smoldering chip, which we later find out is the locking chip. Another neat directorial touch. There's a nice rack focus from the smoldering locking chip with Rhinox being blurry, and then we switch it. Rhinox's concerned expression is now in focus.
Yeah, there's some really great camera angles in this episode, and it's probably all because of the point you made earlier about who's directing it.
Yeah, maybe. A lot of the neat stuff in this episode felt like there was a directorial point of view behind it, as opposed to in other episodes, the interesting camera angles sometimes feel like these are animators playing around trying to do a new thing. And it's not always the best thing to tell the story.
Oh yeah, like with most episodes, like, all right, let's do a bullet train sequence and then get out of here.
I liked Rhinox's little tool belt pocket that he has in one of his legs.
Oh yeah. For some reason, I guess I assumed that was natural, but that's a good point. That is kind of cool.
So Cheetor shows up. And like I said earlier, here we have good Cheetor. He's enthusiastic and a team player without being reckless and headstrong. And a big change from some of the more annoying Cheetor moments earlier, he is able to admit when others know more than he does. And he is eager to learn from them because he says, Rhinox, all right, you're the expert. What do you need me to do? I really like that.
Oh yeah. And once again, this is an episode where Cheetor is gonna put what's the best thing for everybody involved. That's the thing that he's going to prioritize. So you probably already know he's gonna acquit himself well in this episode.
Yeah. We cut over to Tigatron in the jungle. He senses a Predacon. I think we're supposed to believe that maybe he smelled them, but usually they would make the sniff more pronounced and obvious. As it is, and it looks like he's just running along and then suddenly like, my tiger senses are tingling.
Listen, I love Tigertron. I very much want him to be cool. And he seems like he's really good at sneaking up on Preds, but a Predacon gets the drop on him every single time. He'll always just come out and just be like, surprise, motherfuckers. And then there's a spider always comes up behind him. That happens every single time. And I'm just, why is everybody always getting the drop on my guy, Andy?
He comported himself well in that episode where the Predacons were trying to dig the hole underneath the Axelon. He didn't get taken out in that time. But yeah, in the episode with the lens, he's like, hey, Waspinator, fuck you. Oh no, Tarantulas. And yeah, this episode he was, hey, Scorponok, fuck you. Oh no, Black Wreck.
Exactly.
But I did like his confrontation with Scorponok. He is noble in that he alerts him. He doesn't just shoot him in the back, but he still does shoot him before Scorponok can transform. So there's just enough nobility to not be a sneaky asshole, but not enough nobility to be like lawful stupid.
Yeah. And then he gets taken up by someone who just does not give a fuck and shoots him in the face.
Yeah, but we get to that in 1 second. I think this is the first time we see Tigatron's freezing effects of his weapon.
Oh yeah, you're right. He does freeze Scorponok, and I forgot that is a unique offensive capability.
Yeah, so that was neat. But then, as you said, Black Arachnia shows up. I was expecting her to just shoot him in the back, but she doesn't. She instead taunts him. So he's able to get a shot off at her, but she dodges it. And then she tags Tigatron with her cyber venom, and he's taken out. We get back to Cheetor, and we learn that he is going to donate his locking chip to the protoform. The locking chip is something that keeps circuits from frying if the bot soaks up too much energon. So I had an initial thought about this, and then it was confirmed later. When Rhinox installs the locking chip, we are informed the protoform enters stasis lock, and it goes from being the liquid metal type thing to looking like a more robotic solid thing. And so then I extrapolated from this that the locking chip's function is we hear about the other Transformers sometimes going into stasis lock. And that has always seemed kind of analogous to a human body entering a coma. You don't want to enter a coma, but if your body is entering a coma, it is often because that is how it slows down the deterioration. Or often doctors will medically induce a coma if that is needed in some way. And that stasis lock, as we learn here, is also a way to slow down whatever deterioration is going on in a robot's body.
Yeah, for better or for worse, some type of stabilization.
Yeah. So Cheetor, again, being aware of the gravity of the situation and acting appropriately, he's very subdued when he says maximize to begin this robo surgery. Then he enters repair mode so that Rhinox can extract the locking chip. And we get a dream sequence where Dream Rhinox explains sparks. Every Transformer has one. Well, he says every Cybertron has one. I feel like on this show, sometimes they refer to them as Cybertrons, and sometimes they refer to them as Cybertronians. They pretty much never say Transformer in this show, I don't think, which I guess they just felt too much like, all right, guys, I know we're a toy commercial, but we don't have to be that much of a toy commercial, right?
I was trying to think of whether or not Cybertron has some type of different connotation, like human versus humanoid, something like that. I don't know. Maybe I was overthinking it.
I figured that they just thought Cybertronian sometimes just like sounds clunky. Whatever. I'm a Cybertron from Cybertron. Sure. And he explains all of them have one, whether Maximal or Predacon. When a spark goes online, there is great joy. When one is extinguished, the universe weeps. This isn't necessarily like deep stuff, but I appreciate the show getting slightly philosophical and also this explanation of how a robot can die. Because otherwise, you would think, well, can't they just keep getting rebuilt over and over again? Like, can't you just copy their memories and re upload them? Well, no, this is basically their soul. You can repair their body as much as you want, but we cannot repair a spark.
I have a lot to say about this sequence. It is very cool. I think as a kid, I was just kind of like, all right, whatever, it's some dream sequence. But there's so many connotations as an adult that I see now that I didn't see as a kid. For example, Cheetor sacrifices his locking chip. And so because he makes that sacrifice, he is worthy of seeing that there's something more to existence than your corporeal self. Now he gets taken back to the spirit realm where it shows you a little more about how beings exist beyond their robot states. Also, Cheetor goes back to the dream world. We've seen Cheetor go to the dream world in a previous episode.
Yeah.
I like how the being that educates him in the dream world looks like Rhinox. The knowledge appears to him as someone familiar to him whose knowledge he respects, but it's also not Rhinox. So, in some ways, it's like he's communing with something that's a little more omniscient.
Yeah, he's communing with something that is at the core of all Transformers, but taking the form of someone he respects. Or maybe that's just how his mind is able to interpret what he's interacting with.
Exactly. And that's kind of the way I saw it. And then when the Rhinox form holds the spark in its hands, just something about the preciousness of life, I thought really as an adult touched me for some reason. And also, I realize is a very important thing to reinforce to kids. If that's a good message and that's something we want everybody to value. And as an adult, it also touches me that there is some kind of messaging out there that is reinforcing that. I just thought the whole sequence as an adult was just very, very cool and well done.
Yeah, agreed. Like you were just saying with it's a good message for kids. It also does a good job kind of showing why the Maximals value all life. Whether Cheetor was communing with something beyond his normal ken, or even if he was just kind of remembering a lesson he'd gotten in school or something built into the Maximal programming. It shows that Maximals value all life, regardless of Maximal or Predacons. A point of conflict in the show so often has been Dinobot being like, let's kill the Predacons, and Optimus saying, we can win without annihilating them. It's like that acknowledgement on some level that they all know and feel the universe will be worse off for the destruction of those sparks, even if they are our enemies. Like a few episodes ago in Victory. Not all the Maximals, but some of the Maximals were pretty subdued and respectful entering the empty Predacon ship.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, and I do like that it's reinforced that it's not just a shoot 'em up for the sake of being a shoot 'em up. If you want to be a good guy, you do this because you're trying to protect someone or something that is innocent and is not capable of protecting itself.
Yeah. Last note about this dream sequence, bit of trivia. Rhinox opens the dream sequence by saying, "What's new, pussycat?" I do think we hear that again later on in the show. This is a reference to a song. I think the song wound up kind of being more remembered than the movie it is from. So it was written for a screwball comedy movie of the same name in 1965. The song was written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David and sung by Tom Jones. I'm going to guess that the writers more likely were remembering the song than they were remembering the movie, just because I feel like I've heard that song without ever seeing the movie or knowing it was from a movie, you know?
Yeah, same. It's a cute line to say.
Yeah. Cheetor wakes up. Rhinox is like, you got to get in beast mode because you don't have a locking chip anymore, so your body can't handle as much energon. He refers to the energon surges he himself is getting as chip flashes, which I found very funny as someone who has menopausal people in my life who have experienced hot flashes. The term chip flash was funny to me.
That is pretty funny.
Cheetor is like, all right, cool. You installed my locking chip in the protoform, right? So problem solved. We can take this back to the base. And they're like, no, Andy, we're too good for your nitpicks in this episode. We have an answer for all of them. Rhinox is like, we still don't have time. The stasis lock bought them some time, but still not enough to get the protoform back to base and then use the CR chamber to actually finish the repairs. But then I think it was the stasis pod that alerts them that a Predacon has been detected. Because I have written down it's either the stasis pod or Rhinox's OS. But I'm like, they're not always being notified that there's a Predacon nearby. So I think their own operating system is not able to just detect that all the time. Whereas the stasis pod already was configured to be scanning,
Yeah.
because Rhinox was trying to scan for life forms.
Yeah, that's the way I took it. The Axelon is installed with Siri. The pod also has Siri on it. That's the Siri voice they picked. It's scanning. It didn't find a bird, but it did find a Predacon, and that's a big fucking problem right now.
Yeah. It is Black Arachnia. Cheetor, it's his job to lure her away. He antagonizes her to do so. He calls her web breath, which I thought was kind of meh. But I did like, how do you dance with all those skinny legs?
That was pretty cool. I like that.
That seemed like a better way to get under her skin.
Under her shell?
Yeah, yeah. Then she shoots a web at him. I guess in beast mode, I was surprised. I would have thought that she could, in beast mode, only shoot a web strand, but she was able to shoot a straight up full weaved electric spider web. I guess this is another instance of them being able to do something in beast mode that's not quite the same thing as the beast they're based on can do. Which makes sense because they're robots, but often the show limits their beast capabilities to what such a beast can actually do.
Yeah, I imagine that she was in the lab working on her beast mode capabilities, listening to the song Upgrade You by Beyonce.
Makes sense. They fight. Cheetor is able to get her under some rocks. We have a tiny bit of battle inconsistency, I guess, because sometimes having rocks fall on them, especially the especially the ones who transform into bugs, just totally takes them out. But this time it barely phased Black Arachnia. We get a line which I've always remembered from back when I saw the show as a kid. Come out, kitty cat. I won't hurt you much. Which to me just always kind of exemplified the Black Arachnia is kind of playful, but also very dangerous.
One of the things I read into this, specifically why it's Black Arachnia out there, is I'm assuming that they're prefacing that female characters in the show are, in fact, intimidating and powerful and need to be taken seriously. And Cheetor really does get the holy shit kicked out of him by her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but before that, we get another classic Cheetor moment. He jumps out of cover and screams while firing blindly with his eyes closed.
Smooth move.
Yeah, he's like, wait, I've been too competent and mature in this episode. I need to still be a little bit Cheetor. So he does that, and then, like you said, Black Arachnia totally kicks his ass with martial arts. She has him on the ground, pulls out her gun with the cyber venom dart, and this is my all-time favorite Cheetor moment. She shoots that dart and he catches it between his hands right before it hits him, and he throws it back and hits her right between the eyes. That was a thing I've always remembered about this episode. One of the reasons it was among my favorites, and definitely one of the cool Cheetor moments that I was referencing earlier.
So I have a thought about this too. That was fucking awesome. I love how the fight turned and defied our expectations. Sometimes you can see the turns coming. I really didn't. I thought it was going to be lights out for him in this, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
But let me make this point after we talk about the next sequence where Cheetor is fighting.
Okay. So he has that crowning moment of awesome, but then he's got to deal with Waspinator and Pterosaur showing up. He starts getting a chip flash, so he's got to turn into beast mode to lure them away. But I did think it was very funny. He is able to get a couple shots off at Waspinator, and who dares attack Waspinator? Just very funny that imposing line out of that very funny, cute voice.
Yeah, it's like, who do you think you are, big convoy out here?
Yeah. So Cheetor is running from them. We then cut over. Rhinox is plugging into the pod. I initially thought that he would basically be installing the initializing sequence from his own programming. That basically just like, hey, I've already got installed in me from back when I was a protoform, the initializing sequence. Just copy it off of my brain and install it here. But what it actually seems to be doing is, I guess the pod has the initializing sequence, but just its processor is damaged, and so he's just running it off of his own processor. As the stasis pod informs him it'll be dangerous, and then it does indeed make him yell in pain and then shoot him backwards. I had a note here that nowadays they might have this take place with some kind of wireless sync up. He would just say, I'm tapped into the pod now wirelessly. But you and I, we are old middle-aged farts.
Mm-hmm.
I like seeing shit get plugged into other shit.
Yeah, just the terror of growing up in the 80s and 90s and, plugging something in and not exactly knowing what's going to happen the whole time it's plugged in.
Yeah.
Now, question, did we at this point already see the entire fight with Pterosaur and Waspinator play out?
Nope. The protoform then turns back into liquid metal as the DNA scanner activates. But we're left on a cliffhanger there as we get back to Cheetor with Waspinator and Pterosaur. He's able to take out Waspinator by luring him over an energon geyser right as it is about to erupt. So I thought it was a great use of Chekhov's geyser. A good job showing Cheetor being clever.
Yes.
And then he's taken out by Pterosaur, but overall, great showing by Cheetor in this episode.
Yeah, that's where I was going with this too. So, sometimes in football, quarterbacks who are younger and more mobile, sometimes they rely on their legs to get themselves out of trouble. But you'll see them, like, I don't know, get their ankle injured or have some kind of knee injury, and then they stay in the pocket. And for some reason, they start doing better. Instead, they're looking for their receivers to get open and they'll throw like 4 touchdowns. So that's the growth that I started to see in Cheetor in this episode. He starts fighting smarter, not harder, but he doesn't start thinking like that until he's exhausted his athleticism to try to get him out of trouble. So, like at the end of the first battle, she's about to kick his ass. And then that's the first instance. He's going to think smarter, not harder. He catches the thing, he hits her in the face. That's awesome. Suddenly, he's under duress again. He's got the 2 flyers coming at him. So he's as fast on land as they are in the air. He goes into beast mode. He's not going to outrun him. He's getting really tired. Now, once again, think smarter, not harder. There's a geyser. This is all I've got. Let's work with it. Boom. So both of those, watching it again, here's real incremental growth that is shown in this character in the battle and not through dialogue. So all of that I thought was very cool. And as you said, once again, great showing by Cheetor.
Yeah. Good job, Cheetor. This is one of the episodes definitely that contributed to him being one of my favorites back in the day. So we're back at the pod. No compatible life forms have been detected. Do you think that means that some protoforms aren't compatible with certain life forms? Like Megatron, do you think his body is just too big to have a rat beast mode or a bird beast mode or something? Or is this just like it's the generic message the pod gives when it really just means nothing at all has been detected?
I like that idea that certain parts in the transformer are unique to them, even if they're going to be put in a certain form. Like, let's say, for example, a unique immutable part of Megatron is that gauntlet on his right hand. So in whatever form he goes into, it's got to be some form that will allow that gauntlet to comprise a comparable part of the beast mode.
Hmm.
So in that way, it's like, yeah, there are earthworms in the ground, but Airazor, the immutable part of her, she's got to have, I don't know, like some type of helmet or claws or talons or something comparable to wings. So you've got to find something that's reasonably in that vein. I do like that interpretation.
So Pterosaur has landed. He's like, I, in my Scott Weiland cosplay, am going to both kill Rhinox and get the protoform. But then the Falcon flies by, and that seems to make the DNA scanner activate. So it knew that something new had come by, but wasn't actively scanning DNA yet. So I guess the pod had some kind of basic radar or motion detection probably going on, separate from its DNA scanning. It scans the Falcon, does its thing in the protoform. Airazor launches out of the pod, grabs Pterosaur, and bangs him into the wall. I wish they'd animated it faster, because as it was, it looks like I'm slowly flying and then I just gently bump you into the wall. They didn't sell the impact of it that well.
Yeah, that and it's so slow that it gives you enough time to think, why doesn't Pterosaur just fly away?
Yeah. Then he's chasing her while she's in Falcon mode. He seems to kind of clip her with the edge of an explosion. She dives and Pterosaur loses her. And then it's a bit awkward. We suddenly see her descending from above, but it sets up an awesome shot of her in front of the almost setting sun. We see her debut transformation into robot mode. She's got a great robot mode design. A few episodes ago, we were talking about the Masterpiece line of toys. Shout out again to my friend and co host Phil Thomas for getting me the Masterpiece Rhinox. I will tell you, whenever they eventually, hopefully, announce an Airazor Masterpiece, I will be pre ordering that on day fucking one. I've always thought that Airazor had such a cool design. I liked the old original Airazor toy. It's very nice and basic, but it doesn't really that strongly resemble the show. I just think she has such a cool robot mode design. She's very graceful in the air, dodging pterosaur shots, and then she just like fucking dismantles him by shooting her wrist darts, rapid machine gun style. I'm sure TV Tropes has a trope about this, which is like debut moment of awesomeness or something that like when either a hero or a villain, the first time you see them, they're like totally unbeatable. And then later on, they're just equal in power to everybody else. So Airazor gets that. She's the most badass person on the block today.
Yeah, I guess you could fold that into, and I do later, inconsistent weapon power. Whenever the characters debut, they're always overpowered.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. So, like, that also goes into that. Can I mention a couple of other things about the battle between her and Pterosaur?
Yeah.
So I thought it was cool the way her and Pterosaur fall to the ground, I think is an allusion to the way territorial hawks battle.
Mm.
I'm not sure kids got that, but I thought that was very cool. Her robot design is awesome. It also reminds me of the Philadelphia Eagles uniforms.
Ooh, yeah.
By the way, go birds, especially go this bird, Airazor.
Yeah. In all likelihood, I will not have this episode edited and published in time for the Super Bowl. So hopefully the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, let's go. I have a couple of other observations about Cheetor and Rhinox, but I'll save that for the end of the episode because they're also kind of meta observations or high level observations.
Okay. Yeah, well, you do have a bit of battle inconsistency in that this episode, there was so much talk of how a Transformer's body needs to maintain its spark. So, how does Pterosaur being totally dismantled like this maintain his spark? You know, one would think there would not be much functional power left in his body to maintain his spark.
Oh, no, you only need to maintain your spark when you have shame.
Oh, all right.
Pterosaur has no shame.
Good point. Good point. So she finishes dealing with Pterosaur, and then Airazor lands and recognizes Rhinox. I'm guessing either subconsciously just having been aware on some level while a protoform, or maybe subconsciously having picked up some of his knowledge from her boot up sequence having been run through his processor. Either way, she says she thinks she owes him her life, and he says, nah, I'd say we're even.
That's cool. I think there's a third possibility too. I think when she was booting up, I think the Matrix or whatever may have appeared to her as Rhinox in the same way
Mm.
that the Matrix appeared to Cheetor
Ooh.
in his boot up sequence. Like Rhinox was the lawful good entity
Mhm.
and the one who was most noble here and putting the most on the line. And so, as an acknowledgement of that, the Matrix appears to both of them in his form.
Oh, that works. I like that. So then we go to the Axelon. They're introducing Airazor to everyone, except Dinobot. Dinobot's not there, so he's not in this episode. Maybe they're making up for having two of him last episode.
Double Dinobot, now zero
Yeah.
Dinobot to even things out.
Sorry, the Dinobot from this episode was actually booked for last episode. We had to just have him travel back in time this episode to star in that one, and so he's not available now.
You know that if I'm in this episode too, in my contract, I start getting Screen Actors Guild rates.
You can have the day off. You can have the day off, Dinobot.
Rats.
Optimus starts giving Airazor the tour, and Rhinox repeats the line that when a spark goes online, there's great joy. And what I initially inferred from that is that when Cheetor was unconscious, he was actually just remembering something that was commonly taught. Like that's the line that's taught in Maximal School or what's built into their Maximal programming about sparks. And that he was recalling it in his repair mode, and Rhinox was now quoting it deliberately. But I actually do really like your idea that that was the Matrix appearing to Cheetor and through foreknowledge and omniscience, deliberately using the same language that it could tell Rhinox would use later on in the episode to make that a more metaphysical explanation. I like that.
Yeah, and that the altruism of these characters is something that is noticed by like a greater good and a greater knowledge that exists out there. And then when you embody that, that kind of transcends you and goes out there into the ether of the universe. You know, not that there's some sort of higher being out there looking and watching and evaluating all of these characters.
When Cheetor heard Rhinox say that, I was expecting him to have a look of awe, but instead I felt his look was really a like, "Are you shitting me?" kind of expression. Did you feel that way?
You know, I gotta be honest, I didn't really know what was being implied by the last line of the episode. I actually just wrote that down. What does the last line of the episode imply? And I was just gonna ask you.
I think we've come up with a nice explanation that we both like. Real quickly acknowledging, since we've now trying to recognize the voice actors when they first join the show. Pauline Newstone voiced Airazor. She was great. Unfortunately, Airazor beyond this episode never really got a highlight all to herself, but Pauline Newstone did a great job. Ms. Newstone did sadly pass away in 2023 at the age of 79, so we remember her and we thank her for bringing Airazor to life.
Amazing voice. Airazor, criminally underutilized. I wish there were so many more episodes with her in it, specifically because the Maximals now have a native flyer, somebody who can fly in beast mode and robot mode. And that really tips the balance much more in their favor. So, like, strategically, it's so much better to have her around and just as a cool character with an amazing voice. Like, I love the voice actors who do great voices in this show. She's one of them. I wish there was more of her in it.
Yeah.
So, a couple of other notes about this episode. During Cheetor's fight sequence, he has some Apetimus moments. That's what I wrote down. He goes a little bit Apetimus, like when you mentioned when he jumps out from the rock and he just starts firing blindly, and
Yeah.
and he's hoping to just sort of knock her off here. And I was just like, oh, that's wow. He went full Apetimus there. So he tries he tries going full Apetimus,
Mhm.
and because he's not built like a brick shithouse like like Optimus, it doesn't necessarily work, which is why he has to fight smarter later. Cheetor's pretty brave once again. I think he's the best platonic ideal depiction of altruistic and maybe somewhat naive bravery and well-intentioned bravery in the show. It's obvious to see that the Maximals are willing to put their bodies on the line to save the helpless, including Rhinox. Rhinox also puts his body on the line. This was another episode where you're going to love this. Rhinox is stuck in beast mode and has to operate a control panel.
Does that need to be a Beast Wars Minko at this point?
It's getting close. It's getting real close. I thought that was really funny. This is starting to become a trope. I also thought that there was, I think, male female gender role themes here. That's not a value judgment. I think I just saw some of those from like a literary interpretation, like men risking their lives to save women and sacrifice. And this is a stretch, but this is what occurred to me, Andy. Cheetor giving over his locking chip so that they can save and give life to Airazor
Oh,
is evocative of Adam's rib being used
I did not think of that.
to construct Eve. I was just like, oh, wow, I did not expect to see that in there. But there were some really deep themes in here that I just did not expect to show up when I first started watching the episode. And one other thing, one of the reasons Tigatron is in this episode is it's probably foreshadowing of their relationship later, but I don't know, tough look for my guy.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that we've had now 2 episodes of Tigatron being kind of cocky and then getting caught unawares. We'll see how things go for him in the future. Hopefully, we see some better showings from him. I had one other thought, sort of about this episode, but really just the show in general, inspired by this episode.
Mm.
So let's discuss Transformer body types.
Mm-hmm.
Airazor is not as aggressively feminine as Black Arachnia, but she is still noticeably feminine in design. She's got pronounced lips. She's got kind of like a feminine narrowing of her waist into then curvier hip. Her beast mode falcon head is somewhat contoured to resemble in profile a woman's bust. And while some of the male characters on the show have pronounced, obviously male builds, like Dinobot looks like he's got pronounced pecs and biceps, a lot of them just have a generically humanoid or a very robotic looking build. You wouldn't say Waspinator looks male, necessarily looks robotic, you know? So I don't think I necessarily have anything all that smart or insightful to say on this at this point, other than to say, hey, I'm recognizing that male characters on the show are able to have a range of looking from robotic to very masculine. But it seems like the female characters on the show so far are only allowed to look kind of overtly feminine. And that's just something to think about.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. And there's a lot they could have done with Black Arachnia and her original design, especially how completely different it is from the toy. I will say with Airazor's design as an adult, I can see a bunch of different stylistic themes that I think carry depth. She does have a feminine form and sort of like the bust to hip to waist ratio, but she's also achieves like an androgynous form a little better than Black Arachnia. In her design, I think there's some amazing Renaissance elements. If you look at her feet and the design of her head and helmet and the wings, you can see an allusion to the god Mercury as the messenger
Yeah.
and those beautiful types of winged chrome metal accoutrements. So there are some visual designs that imply speed and strength and beauty and grace, and also flight as a metaphor for godliness.
Mm.
So I think all of that, the iconography with a hawk or an eagle, I think there's just a lot of that in there. And I think her voice also has a tie into that. This is someone who not only exudes, there's a femininity, but there's also grace, power, speed, and nobility. So I think all of those things are built into her form, just like the uniforms of those Philadelphia Eagles. No, I'm just kidding. So I think there's like a grace and power element that is much better characterized by her design than in Black Arachnia's. But yeah, I also think there's a lot of gender conformity here. Like Dinobot is built like the statue of David. Like it's just like he's just here to, walk around and kick ass. And Rhinox, he's even more proportionally built than like an NFL offensive lineman. He's just kind of like a wall. It's just like a wall
Yeah.
that walks around. But yeah, that was the 90s. I don't know if we were there yet.
Shall we move on to Beast Wars Bingo, or do you have any other thoughts?
No, let's move on to Beast Wars Bingo. So, as far as Beast War Bingo moments, I did not see a bullet train.
Nope.
I did not see hanging precariously.
Yeah.
Animal looking to the sky. We have Rhinox, Cheetor, we have the hawk animal, and we have Scorponok. That's 4.
Yeah.
I say 4 animals looking to the sky in this episode. I was very pleased with that.
Yeah.
No Optimus body horror moment, although I will say that when Optimus offers to give Airazor a tour of the base, it does seem a little like he's hitting on her, and I was kind of skeezed out like that a little bit.
I didn't read it that way. But...
Let me give you a tour of the base that ends at my quarters. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't actually see any of that at all.
Okay.
And inconsistent weapon power, we alluded to this earlier. Pterosaur's gun knocking Cheetor out by flinging him into a rock. I thought that was a little bit overpowered. And Airazor dismantling Pterosaur with her forearm darts. I mean, come on.
Well, here's the thing. As of this episode, that's not inconsistent because we've never seen her before. But in every subsequent episode that she doesn't just dismantle somebody within a few seconds of shooting her forearm darts, then it will become an inconsistency.
Okay, fair enough. Time will tell.
Yeah.
And there were no stolen catchphrase moments that I could see.
Yep. Unless you count Rhinox stealing Tom Jones's catchphrase, "What's new, pussycat?"
I never said. Yeah, well, no, it is one character stealing another character's catchphrase.
Yeah, I know. I'm just fucking with you.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen every episode of Beast Machines, and that was a weird shit. Like, does Tom Jones show up anywhere on Cybertron as like a transforming plant or something?
Yeah, I did think it was weird in Beast Machines that there was one random character they ran into who's like, "It's not unusual to turn into a beast."
Ba-da-da-da-da-da. You know, Andy, it happens every day. It happens in every way. It happens to Cybertrons all the time.
From your lips to God's ears.
Okay, last part of Beast Wars Bingo. It's everybody's favorite game. How many times was Maximize said? How many times was Terrorize said?
I think Maximize, I think we're going to have a few. Rhinox in the beginning when he saw the pod. I know Cheetor says it in a subdued way when he has his operation. Definitely Airazor says it. I'm going to bet Tigatron says it. And I'm going to guess maybe Cheetor says it again when he's about to fight Black Arachnia. So I'm guessing 5 for Maximize.
That's very good. I only had 4.
Okay.
But they were the 4 you mentioned. Rhinox says it once. Tigatron says it once. Cheetor says it once. And Airazor says it once. I had to rewatch the Cheetor parts because I had the same feeling. I'm like, I know he transforms more than once, but there are a lot of moments where he just transforms without saying anything.
Yeah.
So very good.
Oh, thanks. And I'm going to guess we've got 2 terrorizes in this episode.
Do you have any guess as to who those 2 would be?
Scorponok? Or maybe that's just a partial from Scorponok. I can't remember how quickly he was frozen. I know it was before he actually transformed, but I can't remember if he got the whole word out or not. And I'm going to guess maybe Waspinator or Pterosaur say it when they show up.
Who dares forget that Waspinator said terrorize? Yes, Waspinator says terrorize. Scorponok does get terrorize out just barely
Okay.
in its entirety. Well done. And Pterosaur does say it, so I had 3.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So once again, very good job, Andy.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it. That was a great episode.
Yeah, definitely my favorite so far. Thank you, everyone, for listening and joining us. Please subscribe, rate the podcast, and spread the word. Reach out to us at beastwarstalk@gmail.com, especially if you have a question for Apetimus. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Andy Hunter.
I'm Phil Thomas.
And now we have talked about Beast Wars.